Well, what is going on, everybody? Welcome, everybody, into the Overreaction of Buffalo Sports Show on the Overreaction Sports Network, powered by Believe. My name is Joe Miller. You can find me on Twitter at Joe Miller Wired, alongside my two co-hosts, former Buffalo Bills Jerry Ostrowski and John Fina, who every time before we're going live, or I should say when we're going live and the theme song is playing, they're just rocking out. And I don't know if you're making fun of me, if I'm supposed to laugh, if you guys are enjoying it, but I get a good chuckle out of it. But it's so good to have everybody with us. Please do us a favor. Please like, please subscribe, whatever platform you are consuming this live broadcast on, which we are now, right now, for the very first time, live on Instagram. How about that? So we are now live on the Instagram Overreaction Buffalo handle. Yes, John, go ahead.
Joe, you brought up a great point. I'm sure there's a live version of you playing that song. That needs to lead overreactionbuffalo.com.
Yes.
That was
awesome.
awesome.
Actually, it's like an episode of Beavis and Butthead before we do every.
And we're not making fun of you. We're rocking out. I mean,
we're rocking
what
out,
a great drum line. I mean, your vocals are fantastic. The song just pops, baby.
I want to know who you were singing about, though.
I'll tell you that story.
You're saying you're everything you want. You're everything I need. I want to know who you're singing about.
I want to be everything. Yeah, I will be. Your everything is everything to me. Yes.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that story when we're together again here in a couple of weeks.
All right.
But I don't know that it's necessarily fit for live broadcast. But with that, if you are also listening in post in podcast form on Monday or Tuesday, please please subscribe, please leave us comments. We do our best to jump into the YouTube comments, especially after live shows, to just interact with you guys. And a lot of people do. It's been great interacting there. But yeah, it's great to have everybody joining us, everybody jumping in live right now on YouTube. Training camp, tomorrow, football, the pads go on. So like real football is officially upon us. And we're going to break down and talk about training camp. This is going to be our first camp report, and we'll probably be doing a lot of camp reports going forward until the season starts here at Overreaction Buffalo. And I think where we should start is effectively the title of the program, which is Everybody Eats. I don't remember which beat reporter it was that came on our program and used the wide receiver by committee term first. Was it Skursky? Was that who it was, Jerry?
No, I think it was the guy with the really good hair.
Perino?
Yes. Exactly.
Was it me, John and Perino, or was I don't remember.
It was Perino. I believe he was talking about the Green Bay Packers and how they drafted, and they don't have really one main guy. They let the one receiver go to the Raiders, and they do it by committee. So I think it was Perino.
So the question that I have, because we've heard Josh Allen say it, we've heard Khalil Shakir say it, we've heard Dalton Kincaid say it, we've heard a lot of people say this, everybody eats, which sounds very pie in the sky. Sounds very great. I loved hearing what I heard from Josh. I think it was Josh Allen earlier in the week when he said guys are beginning to understand that if they're not the first read, that they shouldn't be open right away, that they need to not to delay their route, but they need to delay their openness so that Josh can get to them and then be open when he's ready to get there. Where I want to go with this is we have the distinct pleasure, a unique pleasure that nobody else in Buffalo has, having two former NFL level professional football players that are on this network. You're sitting with me right now. So the question that I have for one of you, for two of you, is it pie in the sky? Because I firmly believe the reason Khalil Shakir was open, the reason Gabe Davis was open, the reason Emmanuel Sanders was open, the reason insert wide receiver here is because Stephon Diggs was pulling double and triple coverage. Is this even possible?
I mean, I'll say this, that yes, there are times when a premier wide receiver pulls coverage off of other guys and they have the opportunity to be one-on-one, correct? Does that necessarily mean that the passing scheme and the success of the passing game is all predicated upon one guy getting double teamed? No. I mean, guys got to get open. Guys got to run routes correctly. There's got to be route concepts, all of those different things. So I think that, yes, that is part of the equation, but it's a small part of the equation. And what you're kind of talking about with the wide receivers is something I think is really, really interesting with this team this year. It's interesting in the first 3 days of camp or 4 days of camp as we go to pads tomorrow, and we can jump into that a little bit more as we go. But no, I don't. To answer your question directly, it's not all on one guy getting double teamed, and I don't think Steph necessarily got triple teamed, but double teamed, yes, a lot of times, and it had something to do with it, but not everything to do with it.
Yeah, I agree
John,
with Jerry. I mean,
yeah.
they would certainly roll coverage over to Steph, right? They knew that he was Josh's first read, most trusted asset, and they felt like they could man up and play pretty well on the remaining guys on the team until Khalil Shakir starts to show up. Dalton Kincaid is hitting his stride. So I think to Jerry's point, what we're trying to do now, and we've been saying this, I think, the entire offseason, is I don't care if you go out and you get Jamar Chase or another wide receiver one. I think you have to evolve your offensive philosophy. And what we're getting at is just that, with the type of sets that we're doing and moving the ball around, so they cannot predict who they need to level coverage up and who they can leave alone.
Right. And I think you're seeing that in Buffalo right now, in the fact that you've got tight ends like Kincaid that can really press coverage with what they do. And, if you look and people talk about zone and all that, zone and man, there are literally 7 zones on a field that you have to cover. 7 zones.
Right.
And if you run your route concepts correctly, when you got enough guys to be able to pressure those areas, somebody's got to come open.
I like the concept. I like the idea. I like the philosophy. I want it to be true. And, there was a tweet that went out earlier this week. They were asking, like, what were the best position groups, if you will, or what was the number one position group in, like, Bill's history? Running back, hands down for me. The slate of running backs that this franchise has had has been impressive. And I added to a list that Nate Geary put out that included Hall of Famer Thurman Thomas, Hall of Famer O.J. Simpson, and just like the amount of running backs that this team has had. And Antoine Smith wasn't even in there, who won a Super Bowl, obviously, with the Patriots. And then second, the position group is probably offensive line, maybe linebacker. But what the Bills have never had is a consistent flow of number one wide receivers. And every time we have, I would go Jerry Butler, I would go Andre Reed, I would go Eric Moulds, I would go Stevie Johnson, Stephon Diggs. All of them had, other than Moulds, probably a good, a solid, like great to elite quarterback throwing to them. Anytime that we have, where I'm going with this is, we have not seen a situation in Buffalo, in my opinion, where we've had a everybody eats situation. Maybe Ryan Fitzpatrick, right? But Stevie was here. Everybody eats with an elite wide receiver, right? So we've always, Tom Brady with a bunch of everybody eats guys. Jordan Love with a bunch of everybody eats guys. We've always had an elite quarterback and an elite wide receiver. So I help my doubt, I guess, is where I'm going with this, right? Help my doubt on the everybody eats philosophy.
Well, I'll jump in there. I mean, you could argue that Khalil Shakir becomes an elite wide receiver, regardless of if he's on the edge or if he's in the slot.
He could.
And I think, Joe, what I'm trying to impress is that just because we're, wide receiver by committee or everybody eats, the difference, in my opinion, from, days gone by to now, Jerry, check me on this, I think offensive philosophies have gotten enormously more creative. So from those bunch sets, from those stack sets, those twin sets, they are doing a lot more. And I'll venture to say, because tight ends are a far bigger threat now through the middle of the field.
Right,
yes.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the biggest thing is, to kind of piggyback on what John said, was the NFL has finally embraced what college is doing. For the longest time, they were so against the college game, the spread game, the multiple receiver game, the tight ends that were more receivers than they were end of the line guys. And they finally decided that, you know what, we're going to continually get these guys coming out of college. We have to change our philosophy and how we do things offensively. Add to that the way the game has changed rule-wise, and it goes along the lines of what I've seen out of the Bills in the first 4 days of camp. And it's not just the wide receiver room as far as competition there. There's competition elsewhere, and we'll talk about that. But the thing to me is the team speed has increased greatly.
Yeah.
There's
And size.
Yes,
And
and
size.
size. There's an incredible amount of team speed out there right now, including Dalton Kincaid. And the other thing I see with this wide receiver group is a ton of flexibility. Even Keon Coleman, who was considered coming out, the big knock on him was he was a possession guy. He couldn't shake man coverage, and he's going to have ups and downs. I mean, we're 4 days into this with no pads.
Right.
But the receiver group right now is so – I mean, they're so diverse in what they can do, and they can all do a bunch of different things, and it brings into play that style of attack in the passing game where you're pressuring linebackers, you're pressuring safeties, you're running those slashing type routes, and then you bring a guy like Davis out. I believe it's Davis, the kid from Kentucky, out of the backfield, who has had a wonderful first 4 days in the passing game.
Yep.
Now all of a sudden, all those zones on the field we talked about earlier are being attacked. And you've only got so many people to cover them, and it's hard to do it.
Right.
Jerry, I love what you said. And just think back. Stephon Diggs was either out there on the edge or he was in short motion, right? Occasionally short motion in, occasionally short motion out. Beyond that, there was I think a lack of creativity. Now, look, Brady, first time at the helm. I didn't expect him to come in and reinvent the offense. That's what the offseason's for. And I think that's what we're going to get. And by the way, possession receiver, I'll take Easy Ed McCaffrey. I mean, they called him in a possession. I'll take him all day long and twice on Sunday. If you throw him the ball and he catches it, I want to possess the ball. I've never understood why that's a bad thing.
I love the idea of having to defend Josh Allen all over the field, and then you have to defend him with his legs as well versus defending Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, right? So, like I said, pie in the sky, philosophically, it sounds great. Everybody eats. It's something I can get behind. For me, before Steph Diggs got here, I was the guy on the podcast, on the Overreaction podcast, when people were telling me Duke Williams and Robert Foster were number one receivers. And I was like, you guys are out of your minds. And then Steph shows up and we're all like, oh,
that's what a number one receiver
is. And I think the biggest thing, guys, is the way the styles have changed now in offensive football in the league. For a long time, the defense was able to kind of impose their will or force the offense to do certain things. And now that, we'd like to use the term stress, I think coordinators and those guys, that word they use now is strain. The offenses are able to strain those defenses and stretch them out because of all these guys and the different things they can do and the motion sets and the fact you can put Curtis Samuel in the backfield. Not only can he run the ball, but then you can put him add him in the pass routes as well. I mean, it's really refreshing to see.
Yeah, do it. So let's shift away from that. We got about 15 minutes left. Talking about training camp for everybody that's tuned in a little bit late, live here with us on the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Show. Just things that we've seen and things that we've heard, things that have kind of stuck out to us as far as from reports and stuff like that. Obviously, the three of us have not been to camp yet, but from what we're hearing, one of those things is this notion that the amount of carries that Curtis Samuel could get. And they go back to when Curtis Samuel was with Joe Brady in Carolina. And I can't remember the exact amount of carries, but it was a lot. I just can't see Curtis Samuel with that many carries. Is that something like 3 to 5 a game? I think was the number. It was an exorbitant amount of carries for a wide receiver. The Bills have just never been committed to it. Even when it worked, when the Bills had a guy that could do it, Isaiah McKenzie, they would flash in the pan at once in a while and it would work, and then they wouldn't come back to it for 2 games. Go ahead.
No, I think they do. And I think a big part of it is it's a new form of RPOs, right?
Right.
I think it's a new form of RPO. You can go ahead and get in and out of passing and running plays with him in the backfield. My biggest thing with him is obviously if he's in the backfield, I'm not sure how much pass protection he does. I'm sure he works on it. I'm sure they have some packages in where it's something where Josh gets on his horse right away. Maybe it's some rollout stuff. There's ways that offenses will go ahead and take half the field and run multi-level routes to one side with the quarterback moving, things like that. But no, I think it's another form of RPO, and it's just another way, I said earlier, to strain that defense and make them have to cover more guys than they're comfortable covering.
Gotcha.
Well, and to be clear, they're making a huge emphasis on Cook and Davis catching the ball. So if you got, just throw it out there for imagination's sake, if Curtis Samuel's lined up on the left side, you could move Ray Davis out or Cook out to the right into the slot. It looks like it's an empty set. And then all of a sudden you're motioning Curtis Samuel into the backfield. And now you're pushing two seam routes with Kincaid, with Davis or James Cook, and then you have Samuel following it up with a little wheel route. I mean, the creativity that it offers, and I agree with you, Joe, he's not going to get 5 touches a game. He might get 2 or 3, but the confusion factor and the variety factor is what they're really going for.
Right. And again, think about this, and we talk about this all the time, the fact that you have multiple formations out of one personnel group. You can bring Curtis Samuel in the game, take your running back out, and you can have Kincaid in the game. You can run standard pro set, which is 1 tight end 11, 1 tight end 1 back, right? You can go ahead and you can put Samuel in the backfield and flex out Kincaid and run a 3 to one side, 1 to the other, 3 by 1. You can take Samuel out of the backfield and run empty. Right. So there's just so many different formations you can get into out of one personnel group. And if you have that luxury, the defense, other than the no huddle, which you can't sub really when you're doing that, they're in a pickle because they don't have the personnel groupings all the time on the field that they need because you're able to do so much out of one personnel group.
Jerry, you said something genius, and I don't even know that you said it, but I know that I know that Joe knows that you said it. If you have a guy like Samuel in the game and you've got guys who can catch out of the backfield very well, that lends itself to a little bit more fast-paced offense, right? And then secondly, what I want to draw on is, they're doing a lot. Like training camp is the crucible of ideas. So we're going to throw things out there and see how they stick, right? But when it comes time for the season, you got to be able to put yourself in reverse mode and remember, we tried a lot of these things on. And when we're game planning against the Dolphins or against the Jets or whomever, just remember, we're not throwing stuff up against the wall. We're not making it up as we go. It's part of an overall game plan that wants to take advantage of the defense that's out there. So I think we're going to see some pretty freaky stuff, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah. So we got a super chat, which is great. Scott Blakely. And this is a perfect segue into my next topic or talking point that I wanted to bring up with you two. It was leaked today that Dawson Knox, Dawson Knox said that it was leaked that they're going to be putting the pads on tomorrow. Now, before I get to Scott Blakely's question, which is, his super chat, which is, what I'm going to ask you guys, and it goes along with what I say, I want to set it up a little bit. Traditionally speaking, going into camp, defenses are ahead of offenses. This year, the Bills' offense has flashed. We've all read it. We've all seen it. We've seen the videos. We're reading all the reports. We're hearing everybody say it, which means that the offense is either ahead or the defense is behind. I like the idea with all the new pieces of the offense being ahead. Scares me a little bit that the defense might be behind. However, how do things change in your guys' opinion? You were at camps. You've done this before. What's the primary, to Scott Blakely's question, what's the primary difference and benefit of putting the pads on? Will we see the defense maybe start to gain a little more footing and a little more ground versus playing touch football?
Do you want? I think that basically the difference is really you got your linemen have pads on now, so there's actually physicality in the trenches. You're not playing patty cake. You're not, grabbing and holding and those types of things. I think offensive, defensive line's a big difference. They'll have live 9-on-7, which is inside run. That'll be different. The other thing that you might see, I think that's different on the wide receiver front, and you don't see a ton of, those big hits anymore across the middle. But when you don't have pads on, receivers know they can't get hit. It's a little easier to do some of the stuff they do, knowing that when they go across the middle, that Cole Bishop's not sitting there getting ready to fillet them. So it's things get a little bit different. Arms all of a sudden, instead of being way extended to catch passes, get a little bit shorter and stuff like that. And then there's also the speed of the game. It's still going to be fast, but things slow down a little bit and guys get a little more tired because the practices now are a little more physical. So it'll slow down a little bit. But yeah, I think the biggest difference is those linemen.
You used it. Oh, sorry, John, go ahead.
Go ahead, Joe.
I was going to ask another question, so if you've got a follow-up, please go ahead.
Well, I wanted to address the first part, and Scott, thank you for the question. But what I'm going to say is, thank God there's 10 great quarterbacks in this league, and we're thrilled to be talking about our offense, because if we weren't, I mean, holy cow, that'd be a bigger problem. And look, you sell newspapers with blood and gore, right? Well, blood and
Yeah.
gore in football is touchdowns, your rookie receiver, all these great receivers making plays. Add to that, it's a little bit harder to discern what exactly the defense is really doing, what they're accomplishing, and how well they're playing in non-padded practices. Definitely, this will change. The timing will change. The running game, success in the passing game is one thing, but now they're going to do some kind of live drives, right? We're going to put the ball at the 25 and we're going to see who can go 50 yards. And you got to blend the running game. You got to blend the passing game. It will slow down a little bit. Guys will get a little bit more tired. My fear, or my, knock on wood, just that they take care of themselves, that the competition doesn't lead to any strain injuries.
So yeah, so are the pads the reason that fights generally? So is it fatigue in the sense of we've been here for a week and a half or 2 weeks that the fights begin to happen, or do the fights begin to happen because the pads go on and it gets a little more mano y mano?
Fights happen usually because your ass is tired of being in a dorm room for how many days, and you're looking at the same lunch ladies eating the same food in the same line, doing the same thing over and over and over again. So it gets a little bit tense. That, and then you also have the training camp, all Americans. There's going to come a time when the training camp all pro, or the guy that's trying to make the team, or the annoying motor guy that just goes hard all the time, you're up against them, and you've had your kind of gentleman's agreement with the guy across from you for so long, and now all of a sudden he's not in, and this guy comes in, and it gets a little bit tense sometimes. So yes, usually those things happen because of longevity at St. John Fisher, so to speak.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Echo that, Jerry. And a lot of times you see it happen because you get a younger guy trying to make the team who probably won't, who's in a situation where he ends up against a starter and he thinks this is his opportunity to make something happen, and all it really ends up is his opportunity to get whipped right there in front of
Gotcha.
7,200 people in St. John Fisher.
I think fights kind of reduced once Rube and Bledsoe and them started bringing the motorhomes in up to St. John Fisher. We didn't have to worry about trying to, it's hard to get to Pittsford Pub when you only have a few minutes, but you just walk across the parking lot to the motorhome. It makes peace a lot more. You can get to it a lot easier.
I'm gonna give the floor to you guys. As far as observations from what you've seen, reports, whatnot, anything stick out to either of you?
Yeah, three things stick out to me. First is the practices are like upbeat, man. Like there's a lot of energy.
Yeah.
You can see the energy. There's a ton of, I for one cannot stand the word juice, but I've heard the word juice used a few times. And usually that's by the younger crowd, which that should give it away who used it. But no, I think it's they're getting a lot of great work in. I don't think the practices are overly too long. They're not short like Marv's were, but they're not, 3-hour full padded marathons either. I think that's a big deal. Team speed, I talked about it earlier. They are fast. We're running all over the place. And that's not just receivers and DBs. It's linemen, it's D linemen. I mean, there's speed all over the field. And the last thing is, I think the competition at all the positions is interesting. I love the way they're rolling new safety groups in every practice with the first group. Wide receiver room has a ton of competition. Running back room has a ton of competition. There's only one position on that football team right now that has no competition, and that's the quarterback room. And that's a good thing, because when you have competition like that, you usually have a good team. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. John, what about you?
Well, I like what I'm hearing about the offense, the evolution of the philosophy from last year to this year. They're doing a lot of bunch sets. Traditionally I'm always very careful about those bunch sets being too close to the tackles, because if you're going to run out of those sets. So I'm cautiously optimistic about having whatever you call that, the 3-by-1, where they're all bunched together.
Right.
I do love this idea of the rotation that's going on at the running back position, catching a lot of footballs. I think that is just, that's a weapon that we have to get going. We saw it a little bit last year. I also like what I'm hearing that, Kyer Elam is coming along, and that they are rotating, to Jerry's point, the safety groups, the corner groups, I think when the pads come on, what I really want to see is how does that front four, the defense, really start clicking? Who's going to emerge? Is it Smoot, right? How does Von Miller really going to look? I'm encouraged by that. Rousseau and Epinesa, I've made it very clear. Those are big concerns for me. So I want to see some good 1v1 with great work against our tackles.
A lot of reports that Smoot's been sticking out over the first 4 days.
Yeah. But to
the
your
pads, Jerry, the pads, man. Remember that?
John, expound upon what you just said as far as the bunch sets closer to the tackles and how it affects the run game. Because one thing that was reported early on in the first couple of days is they've gone from being very spread, very wide to being more tight set. Across the field, it seems like that's more of a Joe Brady thing, that they're going to move away from being super wide. In your opinion, is that going to affect the run game?
Well, the issue is when you bring the receivers close to the tackles, they are necessarily involved in the math on blocking, right? They don't love it. They're not bred for it. And a lot of times they don't count right. And run game is all about counting. That's my guy, or we two have those two wherever they go. And we've seen a lot of situations between Isaiah McKenzie, Hodgins. I mean, a lot of guys who end up in a position where they have to run block and they're not very effective. Now, the problem with that, Joe, is you put those bunch sets close to the tackles and you throw. You know, who's worried about the threat of run? So if you're going to use them, you got to have some run schemes out of it. And that's where I get a little tight.
Yeah, I mean, the math is a big deal. I mean, John hit it on the head. I mean, you bring those guys in, now you got, instead of counting is in the run game's not super hard. It's, you know, you game plan for it all week. You got a head up nose. Usually he's 1. The next guy over is 2, 3, 4. If you've got you, the center, or you, the guard, and the tackle, and you've got 4 guys, and the quarterback's got to check it the other way because you ain't got enough guys to block everybody, right?
Right.
Well, now you bring all these dudes in, and is that guy that's kind of halfway out, is he really number 5, or is he not in the box? And, you know, we talk about blocking all week long. That's all we do.
We still do.
Film, and we still do. We look at film. We go through our counts. We do all this, okay? 54 is the mic all week. We're going to the mic, right? I mean, those are the things we talk about. Receivers don't do that.
Nope.
And then you're trying to bring them into a new world, and it's like John said, it's very foreign to them.
And when they're doing it from motion, they're coming from outside, and like, wait, now they're trying to locate the guy, make sure they got the right guy, and then I liken the snap of a football to that little can of peanuts thing, you know, where all the slinkies come shooting out. On the snap of the ball, it doesn't look anything like it did, you know, the moment before when the film was frozen in front of you. Now, holy crap, bodies are flying over the place. People aren't standing still. They actually move. And, you know, it's just not their chi, man. It's just not what they do. And
by the way,
to be fair, we don't catch balls either.
Right. Well, you did. You caught a touchdown, so you can't say never. So you have a TD on your record.
Dropped
there.
One too,
and so do hey. Both of us have a TD on the record, my man.
That's all right. Break it down,
Jerry. You just you fell on it and it got stuck right here.
I had an epileptic seizure in the end zone and fell on a fumble. But you know what? It says it counts as 6 points, just like John.
That's right. That's exactly right. So Ryan has been begging us for overtime. So we'll see where this goes as far as that goes. But we're trying to stick to a relatively decent schedule. But Andy Swift does ask the question of the night outside of the super chat that we got, which is, hey, John, which batch of bourbon are you enjoying right now?
Oh, you know what? Widow Jane is hands down my favorite right now. Just loving Widow Jane. Jerry, what about you? Whiskey, bourbon, scotch?
I've been drinking. I unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately. I've been drinking a bunch of Tuscans and Chiantis and stuff. I've been dipping into the Italian red wine.
Swanky,
gotcha.
Joe.
Yeah.
So last night we were mixing with some Hartford stuff, which is a local distillery here. But I've actually been a little bit, and this is going to sound strange because it's an obscure whiskey. My mom is in the chat. She lives in Tennessee, and turned me onto it, George Dickel. And it's not a wildly
I've heard
known
of it,
or
yep.
loved whiskey necessarily, but
Down here, George Dickel's like Crown.
Like,
is it really?
oh,
Yeah, in the South, everybody drinks George, but I could see in Buffalo that being some sort of like they fight over that like they do
Buffalo Trace.
not Buffalo Trace and the other one that everybody I can't remember the name, but the one that everybody wants.
Yeah.
That they fight over the one that's like people hide it, people trade it. I'll think of it in a minute.
Yeah. But yeah, so George Dickel small batch is kind of where I've been living as far as in the whiskey side. But I'm on the lake, which Richard Rush said. So I've been drinking a lot of long drinks, and I've been
long drink, baby.
I've been drinking a lot of margaritas in a can. So yes, my days are spent on the water, which is freaking fantastic. So we've got a couple more minutes. Any other? I have one more question for you guys that came out of one of the camp press conferences, but I don't want to get there yet. If there's an observation, something that you two want to talk about or report on just from what you've seen, heard, read, yada, yada.
Well, I'm tracking it as well as
Pappy
I can.
Van Winkle, that's what it is.
Pappy.
I'm sorry.
So tracking it as well as I can from 2,600 miles away. The one name that hasn't come up in any way, shape, or form is MVS. So that's a little got to think what's going on with Scantling. But agreeing, going back to the beginning of the show, the energy is great.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, it matters that these players get out there, shake hands, and sign autographs. It is Jerry, just remind Joe the look on the kids' faces when they don't even know who the hell Jerry Ostrowski or John Fina is, but you stop and you give them an autograph, man, and it just makes their day. It's a brilliant, brilliant opportunity.
Yep. The only thing better than that was when you gave him the $40 to $50 to help carry all your stuff up to your room. That was the other.
Some of
those little kids now
move in and move out there.
Some of those kids now, don't kid yourself. Those suckers are hustlers, man. They're out there hustling. They're making cheese over training camp. But no, the thing that I find interesting is that many have made it a point to talk about the increased input or leadership or taking charge that Josh Allen has done over the first 4 days.
Sure.
That's something else that I think is pretty not only intriguing, but also great to hear because we've all called for it for quite some time.
Yeah, super good. Last thing that I have for you guys, we got a little bit of a glimpse, I think, inside the mindset of Von Miller and why he was playing last year. So in the press conference where he was made available to the reporters, he basically said, he said it at first, I shouldn't have been out there at all last year, but nobody was going to keep me out of the lineup, not Bean, not McDermott, not anybody. So I played, and he said, I needed 15 sacks to be in the top 10 all time. And then he went on to say, I only had whatever it was, 3 or 4 tackles last year. He didn't have a good year. Again, I shouldn't be out there. However, every sack I have, I'm going to pass somebody significantly. And what I want to ask you is, at his age, you guys played against Bruce Smith. And when Bruce Smith was jettisoned from this roster, Black Wednesday, whatever day it was, I think is what everybody calls it. When Thurman was gone, Reed was gone, Bruce was gone, everybody was gone. There was, as much as Bill's Mafia and social media didn't exist the way that it does now, there was a feeling that Bruce was he was getting older, right? It was time to move on. I think he put on another 60 sacks, 70 sacks. Like he put on, like the number of sacks that he had in Washington was incredible. No, how many was it? Does anybody know off the top
if you're going to put 60 sacks on, you got to average 10 sacks a year.
Richard Rush, you got to tell us, but I got to. He played what, 2 or 3 at Washington?
Yeah, no, it was 4 or 6.
All right. Well, the answer to your question is
I haven't asked you yet. So, can that motivation be enough for a 34, 35-year-old 2 ACL guy to come in and be productive at that? Like, is that starting to pass those names that Jerry and I talked on a show about not long ago? Like, I just passed this guy. I just passed Terrell Suggs. I just passed. Like, is that enough to keep that motor in Von Miller running the way that it did Bruce? Because it did for Bruce. I just don't know of anybody else that it's done it for.
I think the short answer is yes. And I think they have, they're different. And I think that if he is fully healthy to the extent that you can be coming back from an ACL, then I think he's got a chance because of the style of his rush. where I think Bruce was a little bit more physical in your face. I think Vaughn is a little bit more angular. So if he can make those edge turns, yeah, I think he's got a chance. But again, it's the hunger, right?
Yeah.
And I've got to tell you, I mean, for 20 or 18 or 16 million, I think I'd like to be that hungry.
Yeah, he played in AK Cash put it up there. He played in Washington 4 years. He went 10 sacks, 5 sacks, 9 sacks, 5 sacks. He hit 200 sacks and rode off into the sunset.
That's still a lot for a guy at his age. I mean, imagine Von Miller getting 10 sacks this year.
Okay.
What are we talking about? I mean, what is the conversation we're having, right? I mean, 10 sacks?
Yeah, he's going to have to make the most of his snaps, right? Because Rousseau and Epinesa are going to be the guys, and he's going to be, the secondary thought. So he's going to have seriously high productivity.
Yeah,
but
as good as I think Von Miller has been across his career, he's still not Bruce Smith.
No, absolutely. That wasn't
Bruce is
no. We didn't hear you saying that, Joe. Don't worry.
It was the engine, the motor. Can the motor inside Vaughn drive him the way that Bruce's drove him to get to 200?
Yeah, I mean, I would think. I don't know the man personally. If I did, I could probably give you a little more insight. I would think so.
Yeah,
I hope so. I mean, they put a lot of money in his pocket, and that's what they brought him here for. And if he fought back to try to get a little bit of motion last year, even though he says he shouldn't have been out there, then I got to think that he wants to do it, that there is enough motivation.
Right. Gotcha. That's all I've got for you, gentlemen. I don't know if anybody has anything else you want to follow up before I get us on out of here. Great conversation. What a fantastic conversation for those paying attention. I think the Off Tackle Show will return with John Fino will return probably after our first preseason game. So this Tuesday is On the Beat, and I can't remember off the top of my head who we have on. I'm looking it up as I'm speaking. Wednesday should mark the return of the Hump Day Hotline, and then, of course, Thursday we will be back with Jerry Ostrowski and the Big O Show. It's Jenna Cottrell. So Jenna Cottrell will be joining us for On the Beat again this Tuesday, and then obviously Friday, If the Walls Could Talk in Buffalo with Ron and Josh. So looking forward to that. So we got a really good lineup going on. So does that work for you, John? You and I haven't really talked, but after the first preseason game, probably Off Tackle come back.
We're going to have to talk.
John is non-committal.
Well, yeah, I coach JV football,
I know,
right? I got to be there to lead those kids into mediocrity.
Are we gonna have to purchase a hologram of John so we can just put a hologram image?
Just put my frozen picture up there every time my Wi-Fi drops.
We got one of us. Jerry, you and I are gonna have to work on a John impression. We gotta learn some big words.
Playing the role today of John Fina in today's production will be Jerry Ostrowski.
I don't have enough big words in my in my dialect or in my library. So
sounds like a compliment, but really it's an insult. Get us out of here, Joe and Jerry, for the love of God.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have been tuned in to the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Show on the Overreaction Sports Network, powered by Believe. So good to have you guys this week. Tomorrow, Monday, pads go on for the Buffalo Bills training camp. The first Buffalo Bills preseason game is 2 weeks away, 2 Saturdays away. So not this Saturday, but the Saturday following. And football is right around the corner. It's been so good to have all of you join us. For me, for John, for Jerry, love you guys. We'll talk soon. Go Bills.
Go Bills.
Much love. Go Bills.
Go Bills.